Hello, good evening and welcome to the program. This is Daily Politics live on Trust TV, your destination for everything politics, policy and governance. My name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Welcome on board. Tonight, we unpack the insights and recommendations shared by experts on Nigeria's agricultural sector and its value chain as they tackle the hunger crisis affecting over 26 million food insecure Nigerians. This year's Media Trust Group annual gathering comes amidst growing concerns about the paradox of food availability coexisting with skyrocketing food prices across markets in the country. Experts at this year's Daily Trust Dialogue have proposed transformative solutions emphasizing the need to unlock Nigeria's vast agricultural potential through robust funding, technological advancements, climate adaptation strategies and decisive action against insecurity. Well, join us in the studio tonight to explore some of these critical issues is a panelist from this year's edition of Daily Trust Dialogue. He is the president of the All Farmers Association of Nigeria. We're pleased to have architect Kabir Ibrahim for tonight's conversation. Good evening to you and thank you so much for taking the time. It's been quite the busy day for you today. Let's start this way. What are some of your biggest takeaways from today's engagement, especially from the point of a solution-driven conversation about this obvious problem that we're dealing with, food security?
Well, I will tell you that what was proposed or proffered, if implemented properly and transparently, we would get to the promised land. The promised land here is food sufficiency and affordability. Now, for the last 1.5 years, it has been very difficult for everybody. In fact, you know, I even expressed my disappointment on attendance. And then on my way back, I thought very well that it could be because of financial or macroeconomic instability. That's why people wouldn't even come to that place. Because for people to even fuel their cars now, I know what I spend on my car, and I know that many people do the same. And if you are coming by taxi, you know how much taxis charge here. So life is very difficult, and then when it affects food, then it's everybody's problem, because everybody, the 250 million of us, all eat food. So the competition is very high, and things are not promising to be brighter, except if we do some disruptive innovations or interventions to make sure that before the politicians start electioneering campaigns, we get some sufficiency and some affordability. And of course, you know, so many solutions were proffered, and I believe in the course of the interview we will get to them.
Yeah. And if we can just briefly talk about the stumbling blocks, the challenges that currently exist, because on one hand there seems to be this understanding that food is available. However, to square it with affordability is a totally different conversation. You operate within the value chain. Give me a sense of the scale of the challenge here and what the missing links are.
Well, if you go to any of these markets, the things that you buy every day are very expensive. So we used to allow women to do the chores. But I can tell you that now the men go to the market themselves to be very sure that whatever is bought is brought home, that the woman doesn't keep this her recurring safekeeping in her asusu. So the thing to do generally, you know, in a situation like this is to really look at what you can do in the interim for a stopgap. Since we have a culture of just using wet season production and anticipation of low prices when the foods are available, we should simply optimize our productivity. We should incentivize the smallholder farmers. And mind you, in this country, it's the smallholders that really provide food. They are the engine room of production, because the large-scale farmers are not selling in the market in basins. They rather add value and sell in the supermarkets where prices are even higher than the market. So generally speaking, what we should do is to look inwards, incentivize the smallholder farmers and the small-scale producers to do a little more, and then make sure that we do many things. You know, for the financial managers should do many things to make sure that the Naira, you know, retains or regains its purchasing power. Because salaries, I'm sure here in Trust you experience the same thing. When people's wages are constant and they cannot afford the basic necessities, then complaints are so many, and at every point people will complain that in fact they see nothing good. Even if your station, for instance, provides some incentives, you know, devise some means of making your job better, you don't see it, you don't give anybody any credit, because at any rate you don't eat food as you want. So nothing good will come or will be seen by a hungry person. In fact, you are supposed to even behave irrationally if you are very hungry. A child, when a child is hungry, the child cries. A big man may not cry, but may be aggressive. That kind of thing. So we need to sit down and plan what to do as a nation. You don't look at maybe federal government, or you allow government, or you insist that it's government that should do it. We should all work together, lockstep, with at all levels. That is to say, the federal government has to work with all stakeholders to be able to bring, you know, sanity to the situation. Because, you know, some of these things are unnecessarily dollarized. Because, you know, some of these food items that you produce without putting a dollar component, they are also very costly, because you cannot purchase them readily. They are very costly. So like the example I gave when I was presenting, that if a blind man was offered eyes, if the blind man knows that he would not get the eyes, he would certainly say they are smelling. It's the same thing. Even if food is available and you cannot afford it, it's as good as not there at all. So the general talk in this country today is that there is hardship. And everybody is just talking about hardship, no matter what anybody does. Hardship is pervading the system, and it is what is in the public domain.
So, Architect, there are a lot of Nigerians, and I believe this wouldn't come as a surprise to you, against the backdrop of the removal of fuel subsidy, when the supposed palliative distributions were expected by Nigerians. We saw some state agencies, you know, carry out exercises allegedly saying that there are hoarders within the system itself. And this is not necessarily a new idea. People price gauge, and then they manipulate the markets so that they can make the most out of their investment. Talk to me about the pricing crisis that we're facing in this country. We're dealing with record high food inflation in the history of Nigeria. What is actually going on here?
What is going on is the cost of production is very high. The cost of distribution is very high. The cost of value addition is very high. And then there is post-harvest loss. It is one thing to produce a certain quantity of any commodity. From the farm, because we use, not so sophisticated means of harvest, we lose at harvest. We lose in transporting from place of production to place of use. We also lose money when we process. If you take paddy to a miller, for instance, in the mill, there are losses. They get up to 25% sometimes. And even in consumption in some homes.
Are those losses or theft?
They are losses. Right. They are losses in the sense that if you put paddy that was harvested wrongly, and you put it in the machine, and it breaks. A lot of broken grains may not be accepted, and they will be sold at a lower price.
Right.
So that's the loss, and so all those things together make production cost very high to the middleman, because a farmer will sell at the farm gate, and the price at the farm gate is always lower than what you get in the market. I am from Katsina State, for instance, in Faskari. If anything is produced in Faskari, but it is sold in Abuja, you can see the distance between Faskari and Abuja, and you can see the money that a middleman puts to buy the thing, and you can see what he or she would have to pay to even display what they are going to sell. So all this will be factored.
But do the margins make sense? Do you think, economically speaking, the margins are proportionate, or are they exploitative in nature? Because that is the prevailing sentiment. Nigerians feel like, the government is just standing by as the operators of the industry take advantage of the demand factor.
Well, the truth is, there is not much discipline in our sales or marketing strategies. There is an agency that is saddled with consumer protection. Now, consumer protection, in fact, it ends up in courts. They should operate to protect even the consumer from buying, and when they go to buy, and then the quality and all that. But since we have a mixed economy, it is difficult to have a price control board. So people can sell at different prices in the same market. But the truth is that in real economics, the man who sells higher the same commodity will certainly not be able to sell until everybody else who sells lower sells. But in Nigeria, you find there is an anomaly. Some people just corner the market. In local parlance, they say maybe they have done some diabolical things that will make people buy in spite of the pricing. So invariably, we will have to blame ourselves, because you see, you of course you cannot go hungry, but you can, through word of mouth, tell people that, look, this pricing is not correct. Let us abandon this. Let us get away from this. But we can't do that. I mean, we don't do that. You find people out of ego. It's an ego trip for them to even buy very expensive things. So this is what happens also in food. Because even in clothing, take your dress, is immaculate, looking very good. But somebody will say, no, it's not Shadda.
Right.
So they will not buy it. They'd rather buy this one. So it's the same thing. You go to a restaurant, all you need to do is to eat a balanced diet, but you find that you want to go to a very expensive one, and you tell your friends that you are going to a very expensive one.
So there's a mindset element, or psychological element to even the customer behavior or consumer behavior in Nigeria.
Yes, in Nigeria, that's it.
But talk to me about the government. A lot of people really feel like our government could have done more to protect the interests of millions of people who are living in multidimensional poverty, who are at risk of food insecurity, as captured by several reports. The numbers continue to grow year on year. Give me a sense of how much influence or control or regulatory impact the government should have on what is going on. It does appear like there's a free for all type of situation where anything goes.
Well, honestly, the operators in government cannot go without any blemish. The investment in agriculture should be more than any other place, so that after you get to an acceptable level of availability and affordability, you can do other things. i.e., if I was president, for instance, I would probably not build a flyover. I would rather invest that money into agriculture. When the agricultural production gets an optimum push and we get to a desirable level, then we can do other things. I will give you the example of China, for instance. For a very long time, whatever came out of China was rudimentary. In fact, at some point we called them, everybody referred to them as an iron cutting country. They were there managing what they had until they got to a point where they now opened up and China is everywhere. In fact, the United States is fearful of China more than any other country in the world. So sometimes you need to get into a kind of cocoon, keep yourself there and do what you can to make life better for everybody. Because, I mean, take you or me, for instance, even if we are able to eat what we want at the time that we want and all that, we have relations in the village who are begging us to do. So we are invariably affected by this. And I think this even goes to the president of the country. The president's relations depend on him also to get some, to
There's a ripple effect.
Yes, it's a ripple effect. So we need to look inwards, and everybody needs to have or put their hands on deck to be able to do this. And then the government has to have zero tolerance for corruption. We should have more transparency, and we should apportion blame and punish people who are found culpable of doing anything.
All right. You talk about post-harvest losses, and according to available data, say for instance from last year, the estimated post-harvest loss was about just a little over 3 trillion naira, which is significantly higher than what was budgeted for the agricultural sector itself. Talk to me about funding and what we can do effectively from the federal to the sub-nationals in lockstep, as you said, to drive the growth and development of agriculture with all that it has in terms of potential.
See, for me, it's not the budget. When you say, okay, for capacity building, for instance, for farmers, you put 20 billion, and then it ends up in probably buying some machinery, giving a contractor to bring some machinery, even if they are small, allowing the contractor to determine the quality because of his profit. You buy low profile equipment and they don't last long, and they don't do the desired thing, and you end up where you began. What we should do is, one, we bring transparency in budgeting and implementation. Sometimes it's not the policy or the budget, it's the implementation that is the issue. In fact, oftentimes is the implementation. So if the subnationals coalesce with the federal government and let's say put 20 billion for agriculture everywhere, 37 states, and the national government puts the same amount, for instance, and you put it together in a pool, and you make sure that this is for education to the farmer, to do the best thing, just like what Songhai Farms showed. If you really think very well and then provide solutions to the existing problems, you are more likely to solve them when you look at it holistically than when you are just addressing the issues, peripherally. That kind of thing can make a lot of meaning to us. And like I said there, you should also optimize the production of those items that are staple in given regions. Because you might produce something that is not globally in Nigerian term accepted as food. Look, there was a time when my mother was alive, if you gave her maize, she would say, no, why don't you give us something else? Because maize, you have to do a lot of work on it, and you need to also make a soup. Maybe if you give us something else that we can use readily, we will be better off. So that kind of thing, because, in 1975, earlier, maybe 74. In fact, maize, as you know it, became very popular in our food system in the north around 74, 75. Before that, we didn't have maize in this. The only maize you had was what you would roast and eat and all that. It was not this hybrid type that came and that we were using flour and all that. So, but when you look at these issues very well, like Kabir was saying something, you know, he's from Katsina, my home. He talks of fura da nono. In fact, when we were in school in Katsina, we never had lunch as we have it now. You would have fura da nono as your lunch, and you are happy. It's only in the night that you eat tuwon dawa or tuwon gero with soup. And you were okay. And people grew very well, and we all got very good education. We had good brain power and all that. So that can be reenacted. We should really look at that. Not these days when your child will eat food and still ask for Indomie. You remember? And now you can't even have Indomie, because how much is Indomie now? And bread, for instance. Your children used to play with bread on the dining table. Some of them would even play football with it. It's not available anymore. So a lot of these things, you have to come to time. I mean, you have to come to play. That is, even consumption. You have to really guard against poor consumption. You have to also help in distribution. Do away with multiple taxation, illegal road checks and all that, so that food gets to its destination at a very fair price, so that these prices become affordable. Now, it's a gamut of things that you need to do, and government is the best person to create that enabling environment. Nobody says the farmers want the government to give them everything to use to produce, because if you go to Wuse Market now, all the shops are stocked by the people. No government stocks them. So we don't expect the government, for instance, to provide everything that we need to produce what we want to produce. Rather, we want the government to create an enabling environment. So it's not a question of trillions of naira being put in budget. The agricultural budget, the budget for agriculture does not mean giving the farmers money to do production, but creating the right kind of environment to enable them to produce better, to process better, to be able to sell what they produce, not in its primary form, but value added.
You talk about the environment. I remember the Tinubu administration, against the backdrop of a recent visit to Brazil, one of the president's international trips, opening up the Nigerian economy, advertising it to the rest of the world, looking for partnerships and bilateral agreements and so on and so forth. Talked about how 2,000 tractors, for instance, are being brought in. And when you consider the scale of the challenge that still remains in terms of the production processes, right? How significant is the government's input in terms of not just policy statements, but also creating that environment that you're talking about that would stimulate the kind of growth and development that we want to see? Because it looks like the drops are too insignificant to actually make a difference.
Half a loaf is better than none at all. We welcome the development of bringing in about 2,000 tractors at a time, piecemeal, until probably they reach 10,000. I think that's the logic now. But you remember that we began talking about this farm machinery coming from Brazil from about 2017. I think there was a minister who was always talking about bringing 10,000 tractors and all that. We haven't had any. Now the president has said 2,000 will come. So we should not discourage him. We are very happy that they are coming. And now more than any time, we need we need to replace human power with machine power. So if these 2,000 tractors come in, and they keep coming in that range, Nigeria will get to a point where we will have some form of mechanization, at least better than we had. But the best arrangement, and I just came back from Egypt 2 days ago. The Minister of Agriculture was there. In fact, he signed an MOU with a company that's producing tractors and farm machinery in Egypt. But the difference is that company is coming to Nigeria to set up a plant. Now, even if they produce 100 tractors, if the 100 tractors can be maintained and all the implements and all that can be built here, it's better than bringing 20,000 or 100,000 tractors from John Deere, for instance, and there is no maintenance on them. So we want those kinds of partnerships. And these are the partnerships that the government should try to bring in. We are not, because if you look at a tractor 75 horsepower is getting to 27 million. I mean, very few farmers can afford that. So if you come with those, probably you just give tractor hire service. People will just rent them, because no one farmer will want to buy one or two of them, because that's 50. When are you going to, how long is the return on investment? So the thing to do now is, as I said, we should look at the year 2025 as the year that we should seek to get food sufficiency, and then probably food security. And we do not have to necessarily bring large-scale equipment, farm equipment. We can start by making available small handheld equipment that are really of good quality. Not, some time ago we got some allocation, and at a low price, some of these small equipment, but they hardly stayed two years, 1 year on the farm, and they are gone. So what we are saying is that government should seek out very high quality equipment and then lease them out or sell them at low prices, affordable prices to the farmers, permeate the system with that, because ultimately the best thing that would happen is the number of farmers we have now, about 70% of the population, is supposed to contract with mechanization. There will be fewer farmers than we have today. Maybe you have 70% now. As mechanization takes place, sustainably, the population will get down to 10% and even less than 10%. In the United States, for instance, the farming community, the farmers are hardly 2% of the population. If in Europe, most of Europe, it's about 3%. In Egypt, they have done a lot of work. But Egypt and Nigeria are like Siamese twins in Africa. We are the two biggest economies together outside South Africa. If we cooperate very well and we bring in the learnings from Egypt to Nigeria, we'll do a lot, because even irrigation, we can learn a lot about irrigation. We can learn a lot about many things.
So what are some of those practical lessons that we can mirror from the likes of Egypt, for instance, whom I believe we have some sort of strong ties with in terms of collaboration?
What we should have, really, two areas that I think we can really cooperate successfully are irrigation. Because, most of Egypt has low water supply. They depend on the Nile, and they irrigate, and they find groundwater. They have expertise in irrigation. We need to ramp up our irrigation so that we will be able to produce the year round. Farming just for wet season will not take you anywhere. You need to farm around the clock, throughout the year, and you need to deploy proper irrigation to do that. So we can learn irrigation. And then wheat production. We have a deficit of wheat. We are buying seeds from Mexico. Every year we do the dry season farming, they launch it, and then we still have a deficit. That's why bread is still very costly, and all those things, all derivatives from wheat are expensive. Use the Egyptian experience. They have been able to move. And in fact, in Africa, it's only Ethiopia that gets more wheat than Egypt. Nigeria's wheat production is very, very low. It's not comparable to any of those. But since those people are doing it, they are improvising, because there is not much rain there. They are using their water, water from the Nile. We have so many dams. We have a lot of irrigable land. Once we borrow from there, we will enhance our irrigable land. We already have the cultivable land. We have land that we have not even opened up yet, because we have over 80 million hectares. We are using hardly 50% of it. We should open up, deploy all these methodologies, and ramp up our productivity. Therefore, you have more in the market, and from the simple economics, even if the demand is high, if the supply is very, very high, the prices will go down. And then we have to be realistic. We have to realistically improve the purchasing power of our naira, because most of these things are artificial. And I said something that I know maybe I'm going to get probably whipped for it. I said the CBN's intervention by commission is actually the cause of this food inflation that we have had for many, many years.
How so? Please explain. Because Nigerians saw the CBN directly get involved.
I explained it, but I can come again. You see, the Anko Borrower program, they borrowed it from the United States, but I don't want to bother about that. Outside the Anko Borrower per se, there is what is called the prime Anko. The prime Anko is a guy who comes dressed like me, comes to the CBN and says he or she has got 1,000 farmers that can produce rice. And they can be his outgrowers. Then he's giving a lot of money to help those people in kind and cash to be able to produce optimally. And then those people will pay in kind. And he would pay the CBN in kind. You can see the semblance of that when they did the pyramids and all that. But it's all a sham. It's a charade. I was there. We were supposed to give a goodwill message, but we were prevented from it. Some people who were working in cahoot with the CBN gave it out. To cut it short, you see, those people were buying paddy when there was inflation. Now, the guaranteed minimum price concept is government is not supposed to intervene in the market when there is inflation. Otherwise, it will exacerbate the inflation. So what the action of those prime anchors exacerbated inflation, and that's why you have not had car anything from 2016. Check the records. There was no remarkable reduction in prices, whether it's harvest time or any other time. The difference is always marginal.
So through Anko Borrowers program, you would say the government shot itself in the foot?
Yes, and I think principally, I was there, we escorted the president to KB where it was flagged off. I think the then governor simply wanted a second term and hurriedly came up with the issue. So and then when they came up with the issue, because they had a lot of money, they brought that money, and then trillions have been spent. And there was a paper I presented at the CBN executive seminar in Uyo. They invited me. I told them that the Anko Borrower was not working. I said, it's on record. The current MD of BOA was there, and he is my friend. If you ask him, call him one day and ask him. I said it. And this was, nobody liked it, nobody paid attention, but the truth is here now. And the CBN right now does not do Anko Borrower. That's why it gave whatever was left, the fertilizer, they gave it free to the farmers.
If you have to, answer this question directly, would you say the lack of political will in prosecuting or executing, I beg your pardon, our agricultural development plan is why we are stuck in this circle of underdevelopment and less than efficient performance? No,
I wouldn't want to say political will. I want to say corruption in the system. Some people are simply corrupt, and when you charge them with responsibility, they don't execute that responsibility transparently. That is what caused it. But political will is there because the program is there, the policy is there. This is political will. But the matter is implementation. The president cannot be everywhere. I mean, can you say in all honesty that President Buhari took money from anybody? The Anko Borrower took place in his place. I mean, during his time. So it's not political will per se, it's implementation and corruption. Corruption in all of us. Because if there is no giver, I mean, there is no taker, there is no giver. Corruption is a cankerworm. It's like a cancer. Unless you have the opportunity and the means, it will not thrive.
Right. You're from Katsina, and you would know this particular subject matter more than most, especially because of the current situation we're dealing with right now. And you talked somewhat extensively about it in your presentation earlier during the dialogue session. Insecurity. It has become a rather everyday conversation now in Nigeria for the past decade or so. First, mostly in the northeast, now in the northwest. It has prevented hundreds of thousands of farmers from accessing their farmlands. You talk about post-harvest losses. It has gone up rather significantly. People have been losing their yields to bandits and people who have been exploiting the system. Talk to me about this insecurity and its correlation with the problem of food security in this country.
It's the biggest threat to the attainment of food security, because once the farmers cannot go to their farms and produce optimally, there will definitely be shortage of food. Now, shortage of food brings about inflation in a normal setting. If your currency was strong, you would not feel it the way you feel now in Nigeria. So insecurity is the single most important threat factor to it's debilitating against the attainment of food security. Now, some success is being achieved. The armed forces are doing their best. The issue of insecurity or stemming of insecurity is work in progress, but we urge the government to do more, because unless you do away with insecurity, it will be exceedingly difficult to attain food security in the near future. And I had said, and I would still maintain, that this government has got 2025 to show that it can do something about food security in Nigeria, because 2026 and 2027 will just be electioneering campaign. So we must double our efforts to curb insecurity, and insecurity will be better handled through non-kinetic means. Now, in the northwest, like in my village, if 1 kilometer westwards, you cannot even go to the farm. You cannot even go anywhere, because there are hills and there is thick foliage, forests. What I have proffered I think sometime I gave I presented a paper at the National Assembly, and I said you should defoliate trees. Go up in a helicopter, spray, and get the leaves of these trees to go, so that whoever is moving around will be seen. They will have no place to hide. Yes, the climate change enthusiasts will not be happy with that, but this has happened somewhere in Brazil. It is the Cerrados, the Amazon forests. A lot of work was done. Some of the forests were bulldozed, and Brazil is now a first world, and it's a food basket to many of these countries around, and even to Nigeria. So Nigeria can bear the brunt.
You're saying the consequences is worth it?
Look, it's better to die of some other disease than to die of hunger. To me, I think, look at it very well. You see your son losing weight because they cannot eat well, and they just die standing. It's better for him to just die, fall down and die, and that kind of thing, without ailing for a very long period of time. This is what hunger will do. The hunger will even start attacking you from the brain. You sit with a person, the person is listless, the person cannot contribute anything, the person is worrying about what will go into the stomach, they cannot think of doing anything. That kind of society will forever be below an acceptable level.
So, Architect, let's talk about the current state of affairs and what you make of the trajectory. Are we turning a corner? What is your reading of the situation right now, and what it says about what's likely to come?
See, there are several windows of opportunity that the government has been opening. It is up to us to really take advantage of them. And then it is up to us to ensure that the people settled with those responsibilities discharge those responsibilities very well. Because look, this is a democracy. We are the people voting for people to come into power. We should not vote for them because of small sums of money that they give us. We are not interested in that. Let us see service. Let people serve us and then get our votes. We don't want money. What are we going to do with money? You give us money, we spend it in one day, and then we are hungry for 4 years. We shouldn't do that. This is what we should do. The windows of opportunity that are now available should be exploited transparently. And whatever policies we draw up should be implemented transparently. And anybody found wanting should be punished to deter others. This is the only way we can get there. I mean, in some countries, you face the penalty for corruption is death. And they are not even religious countries. Here now, I mean, when we came for your program today, somebody prayed the Islamic way. Another person was complaining that he didn't even understand that there will be a closing prayer and it would be delivered for the Christians. In some places, they don't even, I mean, okay, they know there is God, but they don't worship God in any way. They are all concerned about the welfare of people, and they are okay. Many countries are not godly. But in Nigeria, everybody says God, 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 and then we are the worst thieves on earth. Everybody. When I went to, the first time I went to Egypt, I think many years ago, 2017 or 15, at the airport, somebody was groping even my, trying to check whether I had money or not. And then at the end, he asked me for money. I said, "You are very stupid." I told him that he was very stupid. I thought this was limited to Nigeria. Somebody overheard, came and pulled the person away and took him into a room, and I think he slapped him because he was giving his country a bad name. In Nigeria, I think you allow this to happen. Even in the photographers now, so many of them have been sending me messages that I should give them money, as if I told them to take snapshots of me. I didn't do that.
Right.
So that kind of thing, that mentality, we should get rid of it. Everybody in Nigeria should understand their limits. They should have respect for themselves. We should loathe corruption. You can't come and impress me when you are driving a car that your salary of 20, 30 years will not buy. You can't show me that you are comfortable because you have a 20-bedroom house. Even if you have 5-bedroom house, would you sleep in all the 5 rooms? You sleep in on one bed, on one side. If you have 10 cars, you drive one at a time. You cannot drive 2-3 cars at the same time.
I get the sense that you think this is a generational challenge that we're dealing with in a multi-dimensional way, where the mindset is involved, where the social values are involved, and everything is all intertwined. So how do we untangle this? And I know the question was, what do you make of the trajectory? But given the web that we're dealing with here, how do we untangle this? What needs to happen first? What needs to happen thereafter, and so on and so forth?
But we have said it all, unless this is tautology, because if you loathe corruption, you are not impressed by it, and therefore the person who is doing it will not do it. But if you eulogize somebody because they are corrupt and they got to a position, and then I will tell you this, and it is very personal. This is my observation, even in the dialogue. You remember that the minister had more questions than any one of us, simply because he's minister. You look at what slides the Songhai man showed. Look at what we learned from him. He didn't get as many questions as a minister. So our people tend to think that every time is government, and you make people feel so important because they are in government, and if they do anything wrong, it doesn't matter. But then people who are honest, who give all they have, don't even get any attention. And this is Nigeria for you, and it's all over. When the president is coming to a place, everybody will come there. I said something there, that if you are discussing food security, availability and affordability in Nigeria, You are doing it in the NAF center. You should have had a very large crowd. Everybody should be interested in this. But look at the crowd there. It was shameful. In fact, I applaud your effort. Regardless of what has happened, you have been able to do what you are supposed to do, and you have been doing for over 20 years. But there is no encouragement. From today's attendance, I saw no encouragement. So we should simply change our mindset. We should be more focused, more realistic. We shouldn't tell ourselves any lies anymore. The situation is such that we have insecurity because of macroeconomic instability in this nation. And it will only get worse. If people don't have food, they will be irrational. If you are very strong, you will take from the weak. And that, God forbid, is what is likely to happen. And that is the trajectory that I don't want to talk about.
Okay. Some would say it's inevitable for obvious reasons. But looking at where we are right now and some of the damning reports that have come out about projections for what looks like a very severe situation, right? Affordability, you've said, listen, it's not much of a problem. The big question is on the affordability is the big question. Availability to some extent can be guaranteed somewhat, right? To the average Nigerians listening to this conversation right now, what should be their takeaway, actionable solutions here? Because I know during the dialogue, a lot of suggestions were made about how even Nigeria as a society has moved away from the subsistent type of farming that used to be obtained back in the days, for instance, where even if it's a small garden, for instance, people have the tomatoes, the vegetables that they can easily pluck from their gardens and cook the food there. Now everybody wants to go to the market to buy everyday items. What is your suggestion in that area, and what needs to happen for the average Nigerians who need to find easy solutions?
I think the major thing now, outside insecurity and climate change, is the purchasing power of the naira. You know, you have a CBN, is supposed to regulate and stabilize the currency. If our currency is allowed to float like this, and the dollar is the main thing, then we will forever be in trouble. Because you are talking of only, food. What about other things? Since we removed fuel subsidy, the graph of poverty has been rising. And when I think, when you look at some of these things on the scroll bar of some of these TV stations, they say Naira finished at 1,543, 1,000 days like that. Then is 1,500 an achievement? Is it an achievement? If Naira gains 20 Naira to the dollar, is it an achievement? The dollar should be less than 200 Naira for us to really start celebrating. Once we cannot buy what we want at the time that we want, and that the necessary things that we need, that is food, then there will be poverty. Once you can't afford food, there is a problem. In the United States, they talk of food security there. With $2, you will buy take away Roy Rogers, that is to say tea and some fried chicken or something. Driving down, you buy it and you fill your stomach, and that's all. You continue. Nobody cries of hunger. Nobody. But even there, when inflation shows its head or rears its head, people work very hard to make sure that it comes down. And you can lose an election because of a move of 1%, 1 point. Right. Here in Nigeria today, we are talking of 40% food inflation, and we are still sitting here, right, and we are being called to come and listen to the issues being raised, and nobody wants to come. Right. And then all you do is you think federal government will solve the problem. No, the productivity actually takes place in the states. Right. If you give a state 10 billion, for instance, and all it thinks about is to do flyover when people are driving their last cars, or they can't even drive the cars because they can't put fuel on them.
Okay.
What purpose will that solve?
Right. I was hoping that we're going to end on a very positive and cheerful note, but from the analysis, I get the sense that we're going to end up with much more grimmer or bleaker assessment. But of course, that is the reality of the situation as things stand right now. Architect Kabir Ibrahim, National President of Farmers Association, thank you most kindly for joining us on the program tonight. Really do appreciate your expertise.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
All right. That is indeed our show for you tonight. Thank you most kindly for joining us. Daily Politics will be back tomorrow, live and exclusive as always on Trust TV. Until next time, my name is Abdullahi Ahmed. Good evening.